Well, Mr. Trump is a friend of yours.
Yes.
I think you would. I know him casually. I've never seen from the man in my meetings with him any trace of racism,
No.
any trace of malice.
So what do you make of his campaign, which has traces of racism and traces of malice?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's obviously playing some sort of character.
He's got a part here. The part is.
By the way, if you want to download this book, it's half in Latin and half in English. The English translation is from 1920 or something like that. The book was originally printed, published in 1763. Yeah, 1922 is the Latin to English. It's the, here it is right here. It's the Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis. I warn you, however, if you try to read this, your brain will explode long before you even make it halfway through one page. And I don't mean the Latin, I mean the English. You won't be able to make it. You think that's an exaggeration, but it's not. At 506 pages, basically 300 pages of it is, of course, in English. It's Latin English, Latin English. It's it will melt your brain. You won't be able to get it. You won't. I mean, you will read it. One sentence will cause your brain to fold up like a cheap card table. You think I'm joking about that, but if you download it, other people have downloaded it, and they said, I didn't believe you, but you're right. I don't get it. This is easily stated Nikola Tesla's most favorite book. But I am getting directly to the topic and what Nikola Tesla's secret methodology was. Nikola Tesla was a true scientist, but let me point out to you that there are three types of scientists, and of course there's a scientist in connotation, a scientist in denotation. You actually have to have the best of both worlds, kind of like the best athlete who is the best physically might have really, really poor mental fortitude. They might have great muscles and be in perfect health, but you actually have to have both the mental and the physical. And Nikola Tesla, so far as a scientist, had the best of both of these worlds. He had an acute analytical mind, but he was also experimentally and physically hands-on. Here we have, just like Thomas Edison was hands-on, but I'm going to show you where Thomas Edison was a failure, even though Thomas Edison, I think, died with 1,200 patents. Thomas Edison was a tinkerer. He was not a thinker, and I'm going to give you a quote from Nikola Tesla here directly about Thomas Edison, even though Tesla himself actually gave several favorable quotes about Edison in his later years. He also basically considered him to be a tinkerer, which is what Thomas Edison was. Anyway, Nikola Tesla is known both in Colorado, New Jersey, and countless other places to be incredibly hands-on. He has very gnarled, farmer-like hands for a reason. I mean, he was forever known to be hammering on nails to build wood structures to hold up the copper wiring for his countless creations. He was a hands-on person, but he was extremely intellectual. Absolutely everybody knew he was extremely intellectual. You have to be an intellectual to even dare to read Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis. Here, let me lay out for you immediately now Nikola Tesla's great secret that nobody has mentioned before. We have one class of inventors. You could say scientists, you could say inventors. There's connotation and denotation, but one class is someone that tinkers and they putz around, forever, perpetually, or even short term, and they make an aha moment. And that's a good thing. Obviously, it got Thomas Edison very far, and of course, he was more of a businessman, obviously, so than Tesla, who died broke and penniless. Tesla made quite a few errors, but his errors were in business acumen. I mean, obviously, Nikola Tesla was obviously the Steve Wozniak of his day, and definitely not the Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, obviously, couldn't build a friggin' computer to save his life. And but the two of them together, for example, perfect analogy, made Apple famous, made Apple what it is today. I'm not giving praise to Apple, but the point is that Thomas Edison was a tinkerer. He was not an analytical, an intellectual. He was absolutely not. Before getting to Thomas Edison, this is a quote about Thomas Edison by Nikola Tesla. Let's first start off with a quote from Nikola Tesla. The exact wording is roughly to the point that Tesla himself said about himself that he would build things in his mind and he would reconstruct them and reinvent them and run them in his own mind, and he would redesign them. He would perpetually build a device in his mind and, tweak it, and then after he built it, he would run it to see where the failure points were. This is a famous quote from Nikola Tesla. Now on to Thomas Edison. If Thomas Edison had a needle to find in a haystack, by the way, this is specifically retroduction. This is a direct quote from Nikola Tesla. If Thomas Edison had a needle to find in a haystack, he would not stop to reason where it was most likely to be, but would proceed at once with the feverish diligence of a bee to examine straw after straw until he found the object of his search. Now, this is a deduction, induction. It is linear analytical thinking. This is what Nikola Tesla is, throwing dirt in the face of Thomas Edison for. Just as a little theory and calculation would have saved him 90% of his labor. He talked about this before on Thomas Edison's light bulb. Nikola Tesla did in another quote. He basically accused Thomas Edison of tinkering and pissing his life away, wasting an enormous amount of time when he could have arrived at the solution much, much quicker if he had, a strong intellectual mind to apply retroductive and analytical thought to problem solving before just putzing around like, well, that didn't work. That's not the way a light bulb does it. Well, this is another way. Yeah, that didn't work either. It's on and on and on. I mean, Thomas Edison ruined a lot of his life doing this, and this is what Nikola Tesla said. Thomas Edison is that first sort of scientist. He putzes around. He knows how equipment works, and he gets a little idea here and there along the way, but he's a tinkerer. Okay, and then there's another type of scientist on the opposite end of the spectrum of Nikola Tesla, and this is the reason why Nikola Tesla called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot, and he said Einstein was a beggar dressed in the purple robes of a king who fools, took, as a king, because Einstein, by the way, means one stone, which is also a slander. It actually means idiot, but literally Einstein's very name means idiot. But this is not about Einstein. It's about scientists of his time, which are far, far worse now than they even were in his time. Scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and yet be quite insane. Very important point on this because, for example, like insane asylums, and we've seen movies like this, and this isn't, a valid fact. There's some incredibly intelligent, like chess masters and people that can do differential algorithms, in their head. They could literally like write on an invisible chalkboard and do the math in their own mind, but they're insane. They're brilliant mathematicians, but they're completely insane. And this is entirely what quantum mechanics is today. This is a bunch, they're not scientists. Well, sure they are. They're PhD of science. No, they're mathematicians. Math doesn't explain anything. It's not hands-on. It doesn't have to be hands-on necessarily, but you actually have to have both the intellectual prowess, but also, the ability to know how to build things, know fundamentally, how the universe works. Math doesn't explain anything. I mean, this notion of virtual particles and, gravitons and gluons and this sort of cult of bumping particles is completely ridiculous. It has no basis in reality. Let's give another quote from Nikola Tesla on these type of insane scientists. Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a mathematical structure, which has no relationship to reality. And now this is obviously a quote from back in the early 1917, I believe. Anyway, this is so incredibly accurate. This is exactly what the idiots of quantum are exactly like. They've literally substituted mathematics for building things and experimentation and rational science. Let me repeat those two words, rational science. Nikola Tesla was, above all else, a rational scientist. He's a person that actually had the intellectual prowess, but also, had gnarled hands like a farmer with his hands in the dirt. I mean, he was constantly building stuff. The enormous flat coil behind Nikola Tesla in this image is of his own making. I mean, he hammered all those nails, he laid all that copper wire. That's his own creation. He had the best of both worlds. I mean, he has mind buried in the deepest book. I dare you to read Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis. You're never going to be able to do it. I mean that literally. You're not going to be able to do it. So Nikola Tesla, unlike on the one end of the bad spectrum of science, we have someone who putzes around, tinkers. Basically, Thomas Edison was a guy who was a broken clock that was running 24 hours a day, and of course, as we all know, a broken clock is right twice a day, and that's the secret of Thomas Edison's success, is that he was always running, but his clock was broken. In other words, intellectually, his clock was broken, but because he was always running, he at least hit it twice a day, exactly like a broken friggin' clock. Eh? And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have mathematicians who are called scientists, but who are not scientists at all. They create obtuse equations that do not explain anything, and no aspect of math has ever explained anything. Math doesn't explain anything. Descriptions are not explanations. Just because the math works doesn't mean anything is a correct explanation of how the universe works. I'm not against math whatsoever, but math does not explain anything. Yeah, this is bean counting. Nikola Tesla is a guy with these. This is Nikola Tesla's secrets. These are two ideal pictures to juxtapose who he was and the secret of his success. Obviously, he was a brilliant person, not in question, but he had the two aspects that were necessary, absolutely necessary for supreme success. Well, actually, three. He had to have the funds, and of course, he got funding, from various sources. Of course, the funding eventually ran out, but he had the time. He wasn't busy with wives and children, and he was not encumbered by, begging for food. He was there for a while, thanks to Thomas Edison and his pathetic tomfoolery. So he didn't have a wife or children to, bother his mind with, the normal pathetic crap that normal human beings deal with. But he had the two aspects that modern scientists do not have. He had the intellect, and he actually had the hands-on. The marriage of these two is the merger, the perfect storm of intellectual perfection. No one's ever made a video on this, but this really is the fundamental secret of Nikola Tesla's success. That's not to say he wasn't born a brilliant person. I'm not saying that at all. But everybody out there actually has the capacity to cultivate these two things. Math itself isn't going to get you there, and math is not science. It's not. Well, sure it is. Everybody knows math is science. No, it's not. These people build crazy, unicorn and leprechaun nonsense explanations for the universe. Completely ridiculous, completely divorced from reality and common sense. I mean, 99.99% of so-called quantum science has no basis in reality. It is harebrained, wackadoodle, intellectually perverted nonsense, poppycock, twaddle, ignoramus, hooey, complete malarkey and baloney. Okay? Nikola Tesla had the intellectual prowess and he had the hands-on prowess. And he sat dead center opposite to two different types of so-called scientists. Thomas Edison, who is a tinkering putz, and then the mathematicians who are not scientists, who build an unconventional, unreal, fantastical Star Wars level of wackadoodle nonsense with no connection to reality. Absolutely none. And this is Nikola Tesla's secret. It really is. I said this is not, robbing him of being born a genius in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that anybody out there can cultivate these things, and you should cultivate these things. This is a double exposure, by the way. Tesla would have been electrostatically. By the way, there's another quote from Nikola Tesla. It says, among his favorite things, he considers his favorite things to be books. So this is Nikola Tesla in his, this is actually his experimentation room, not his lab. But I mean, there's distinction without a difference. But anyway, so thank you so much for